Hello, everybody, and welcome to Whimsically Wicked, a reading duet. My name is Haley, and I'm the whimsical half.
And my name is Daria, and I am the wicked half.
This is going to be a little bit of a different episode, kind of a bonus episode. We're going to release an episode week over week for the next few weeks.
Yeah, we're doing a part 1 and part 2 for this one because we recorded part 2 the day after It Ends With Us came out in theaters, or the day after we watched it on the 11th of August. Didn't know a lot about the drama at the time, learned a lot about the drama, and we were like, you know what needs to be talked about? This.
And we kind of, in that episode, speculated on a lot, but then so much more information came out. And I think both of us have a lot of thoughts and feelings and opinions on the whole matter, but all of those things kind of come into a couple things that we feel are really important in the book community. One of those things being what this movie and this book is actually about and how it's become marketed and all of those things. But secondly, and I think the most important thing to both of us, is this book to movie adaptation. We both feel that whatever gets a book into people's hands is what is ultimately really productive in these conversations. And we love reading and we want to see more books become movie adaptations. And this is one of the first really, really big ones that we've seen in
really long time, especially to movie, not to like TV, because obviously House of the Dragon, massive, but it's on TV. This is the first one that's been really, really big to go to theaters. Again, there's been other ones like Red, White, and Royal Blue. All of those, like after, they have like kind of been in theaters, but have mostly been on streaming services.
Yeah, but what I think is also with this one is it's just one of the biggest. Like, it blew up. Colleen Hoover being such a successful author, and this coming into movie, everybody was bought in right off the bat, and it kind of caused this like media frenzy about speculation about what was going on behind the scenes, what the movie was actually about, how it was marketed, what the drama was all about, which you don't see on all of them, like you mentioned. And it happens a little bit less, I think, in like fantasy books that become movies and things like that too. This one just really was a different conversation, just I think because of the content of the film and also who was fronting it and all of those things just kind of
it was
spiraled.
The perfect storm to be a viral catastrophe, in my opinion.
So what I think we want to talk about today is what happened, like what all of the media is saying, what some of the interviews were happening, maybe a little bit of like what our opinions are on it. Try not to speculate too much. And then, you know, like kind of what the dangers that we feel like are coming out of this. And then we'll go from there.
Yeah, and I'll preface this with, like, our research is definitely far from perfect. We both have full-time jobs, and, like, I'm a painter. I have a life. Things have to happen outside of this, so we've done the best we could doing research. We've watched a lot of interviews. I spent, like, 3 hours last night on YouTube at 1.5 speed watching interviews.
Yeah.
I tried to stay away from other people's opinion videos as much as I could because I didn't want that to color my opinion. And I also tried to stay away from the comment sections because they made me irrationally upset.
Oh, those comment sections, man, it's so bad. And I did the same thing. And one of the comments that we had at the very beginning is like how hard it is to actually find full interviews.
I know. Everything was just like something else someone else had reposted out of context with like a one sentence, if that, snippet of a conversation, and then like just their opinions. And I was like, I need the interview. So I had to start looking up like the actual like journalists YouTube channels where I'd be like, okay, I need Us Weekly, I need Time Magazine, like I
Access Hollywood. Yeah, you actually had to find those interviews, and we were sending them back and forth to each other to make sure that we were getting the right information and we were able to build our own opinions off of it. But like I said, this is all going to come from our perspectives on what book to movie adaptations mean to us and how we feel about them, and then just like some of the opinions that we might have on you know, how the movie was produced and everything.
If you want to hear about what we think about the movie and the book, though, episode number 2 coming out next week, we'll cover that. And I will say we are definitely in the minority.
Yeah.
Based on the opinions I've seen, which I think is so interesting because we have no skin in this game. Like, I don't love Colleen Hoover. I had never read It Ends With Us before like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I have never gone into any of those books. Like, I didn't think they were going to be good.
Right.
Did not disappoint on that front, that's for sure. But I will say we were very contrary to the majority of people who've done content on It Ends With Us because we actually really enjoyed the movie.
Right. Which is crazy.
And I think our points for why we enjoyed it were so valid when I look at like what people disliked about it. I was like, okay, but like Subtext, my friend.
Right, exactly. Okay, so let's like kind of start at the beginning. So back in, I believe it was like 2016, 2017, Baldoni gets the rights to direct this movie. So Baldoni was always going to be this director, and things kind of started like to continue. They weren't sure if they were going to make the movie, and then at some point, Colleen Hoover calls Justin to say, "Hey, also, I think you would make a very good Ryle. I think you would play that really, really well." And so Baldoni took a minute and thought about it, by the sounds of it, because what I think the perception on that could be potentially dangerous, which we can talk about a little bit later. And then Blake Lively gets executive producing rights, which for those of you who don't know, you might know more about this than I do actually, is that she basically has final say. She is paying for the movie.
Yes, I actually copy and pasted the definition of what an executive producer is, just because I found there was like a ton of misinformation on this when I was looking at stuff online. The definition of an executive producer is that they may finance the film, participate in creative effort, or work on set. The responsibilities vary from funding or attracting investors into the movie project to legal work, scripting, marketing, advisory, and supervising capabilities. Or capacity, sorry. Oh, fuck. It's fine.
So translating that, basically she has final say on the movie. She has final say on the end cut of the movie. She has the ability to put her opinion into the movie.
She gets to market it the way she wants to. She gets to write it the way she wants to.
And I think the other part of that too is that she also is not being paid to be an actor in this movie, right? She makes money based on how the movie does. So I think that's also additional context that we can add in there. And then, so this movie gets created, and it leading up to the film, they end up starting to market it. And what was called out at the very, very beginning was that Baldoni is not followed by any of the other cast members on Instagram, which to me at the beginning kind of seemed whatever. But then they were also all posting on their stories completely separate about the movie and the marketing. They weren't together ever. Baldoni wasn't in the room with Blake or anything like that. And then the other piece was that they were just marketing separately. Like Baldoni wasn't present in all of the marketing events, which he later had told the press that he was actually traveling with his wife. So he wasn't actually there to do it. So then people were like, okay, that's totally fine. But then when he did show up, he was again completely separate from the rest of the cast, and that is when the internet really spiraled. And at this point we didn't have a lot of information to say like this is a rational spiral or irrational spiral.
Yeah, like you can tell he's not in the same place as everyone else when he's doing the interviews. They're like at home or in hotel rooms, so that makes sense that like maybe he was off doing other stuff that was contrary to the marketing, and maybe Blake was like, hey, go do your thing, the rest of us will handle this. Which, sure, but the red carpet, I think, is the moment where a lot of people were like, oh, this is bad, because he wasn't in any cast photos. They don't even like speak from what is recorded on media, so that one didn't look great for any of them.
What I want to talk a little bit about is the whole perception of this movie in general and the dangers that it had, and maybe some additional context that might sway them to do it this way. So Baldoni, first of all, he is both the director and one of the main characters playing the abuser in this film. The optics on that already have the potential to be very, very bad, right? Because not only is he responsible for making sure that he is acting in a way that is true to the movie and true to the way that the abuser acts so that it can make an impact, he is also responsible for directing everybody on those scenes. He's responsible for making sure everybody feels safe on those scenes and making sure everything is going the way that it needs to be, and that just has so much danger associated with it and potential for the optics to be bad in the public eye.
Absolutely.
Additionally to that, the way that the other side of this was being marketed with Blake and Ryan, who was involved, it was kind of weird that Hugh Jackman also got involved with this from the Deadpool Wolverine movie. They were kind of marketing it as if it was a kind of a romantic comedy, and so had, Blake, Ryan, and Baldoni all, posed together in a smiling photo for the red carpet or anything like that, that also could have the potential to be perceived as negatively, because you're like, oh, they're just posing happily with the guy who was playing the abuser. So I think there was a lot of caution going into the marketing right from the get-go, and honestly, rightfully so.
Absolutely, because it's hard. And like one of the questions I'd pose to anyone listening to this is, how do you market this well? How, like, and I genuinely don't know the answer to this question, but I feel like so many people are criticizing the marketing, as they should. It's bad. But not a lot of people are coming forward with like, you should have done this instead, or this would have landed better for me.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what's really missing in this discussion is like, how do you market a movie about this that is going to have this much of an impact on so many people? It's for a story already millions of people hold near and dear to their hearts. Like, how do you market that in a way that's actually satisfying for the majority of your audience? Because no matter what you do, it's gonna be bad.
Yeah.
No one, like, there's no win-win situation in this, but I just want to know what people think would be a better way to market it.
Right. I think my answer to that, like my opinion, very like not qualified in the world of Hollywood, is that you market it as a collective front, and that didn't seem like it was happening. There definitely was some creative differences. I don't think any of the actors have lied about that. But what I do like, Blake Lively even pulling in Ryan Reynolds to like work on the screenplay, part of me is like, that makes sense. Like, they're married. They always work on projects together and things like that.
She's in Deadpool and Wolverine.
The only thing that came out as a result of that was that she did it without the screenwriter's permission or knowledge of it. So she didn't tell them ahead of time, which again, she's the executive producer. It is within her right to do so. But should she have also let the screenwriter know that she was getting her husband to rewrite lines? Probably. And this is just all this like, here's he said, she said situation that like doesn't really add to the productive conversation. But what did come out of that was apparently 2 cuts of the movie. There was Baldoni's version and then there was Lively's version. And that can be seen, like if you just Google the 2 different movie covers, they're there. And they are very, very different. They have 2 different perceptions. Blake Lively's only has her own name on it, and it is flowery and it is written as the romantic kind of movie that she had been marketing. And his had a little bit more of a darker theme. You could tell that it was a bit more of a serious movie. And I just still have not been able to find out which cut actually made it to theaters.
Yeah, and it's so interesting too because people were like, well, if it's Blake's cut, it's more rom-com-y. And I was like, this movie was not rom-com-y at all. Again.
Which makes me think it was Baldoni's.
Yeah.
But it was her cover.
What was her cover? Well, I did see his cover. I can see from an aesthetic standpoint and from the aesthetics of how this book was marketed, choosing that one to stay in line with that like perception, and I'm going to be really baseline with this, but color palette.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, because this is like, even when It Ends With Us was first published, it was like reviews from 10 years ago were like, grab your florals, like it's all about the flowers and stuff like that. So I can see why they chose hers.
Yes.
Over his, just to fit with the aesthetic that they already have marketing for this.
Yeah, and just based on like the actual movie and its contents, it leads me to believe that it is Baldoni's cut. But again, there's a lot of speculation and I have no idea which one actually made it to theaters. And we might find out at some point. There's a lot of like Reddit threads about petitions to try and see Baldoni's cut because they think it was Lively's. I've seen other people think that it was Baldoni's. We have absolutely no idea which cut made it to actual theaters. What we do know is that Blake Lively brought in the editor from Deadpool and Wolverine, which I think is a very interesting point, to come and take a look at Baldoni's cut and change it. And then that's how the 2 cuts got made. So I think what really spiraled the internet out of control is all of the interviews.
Yeah.
Because they were so different.
They were blindingly different. And I just so find it so interesting. And one of the things that I went into this, like, and a bias I had going into this, was my brain doesn't go to great places when I see women choosing to band together and a man by himself. I'm going to put that out there right away. Immediately I go, what did he do?
Right.
And I don't know that I'm wrong to have that immediate bias necessarily, but in this case, like, I don't know if that's the case. But it's always a red flag in my brain when there's like Colleen, Blake, I'm sorry for the actress who plays young Lily. I don't remember your name.
Isabella something.
All of them like doing their press separately from him. Even the male actors on this film did their press separately from him. So I'm like so curious as to what would have caused that to be the case.
Right.
Because you'd think if there was like creative differences and they were mature about it on both ends, they would like, you'd be like, okay, this part of the cast is going to go with you and do press, and this part is going to go with you. Versus what happened where it was just like Blake and everyone else, and then Justin.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
blank room.
And we can, like, I don't know that you are wrong to have that bias going into it, but I think that's why we want to have this conversation in a facts-driven scenario, because we also don't want to just try to cancel anybody who might not have done anything wrong. And so, well, let's talk about Baldoni's interview, because Baldoni, in interview with Access Hollywood, he said that he doesn't think anyone realized how involved Lively was in the movie process and the directing and all of those things. And he said that in a number of different interviews. And I think that part of this really was to ensure that he was putting out there that, hey, I wasn't in every single scene telling everybody what to do. Like, I recognize that, he said this in interviews. He was like, I recognize that my bias as a man had the potential to not get this movie right. And in every interview I've seen him talk about how he really wanted to get this movie right. He wanted to protect Lily. I saw that so many times, and I thought that was a really important point. He wanted to protect Lily because this is a movie about domestic violence. And Colleen Hoover, regardless of the writing style, she also shared that this is a book about domestic violence and the complexities of it, and, you know, like, sharing about what the internal struggle is of a woman staying in an abusive relationship like that. And he wanted to make sure that he did not put out a movie that victimized her in a way that, like, people were gonna
push the blame onto her.
Exactly. Yeah. They wanted to make sure that we understood Lily's perspective. We understood why it was so challenging for her to leave and all of the complexities around with that. And he said in those interviews, I recognize that my bias has a chance to get this wrong, and I needed to bring those people in. And that's kind of where he stood. So he said he took a really big step back in a lot of the scenes where there was DV, because he was like, this needed a woman's eyes. We need an intimacy coordinator that is a woman to make sure that we're getting it right. He talks about, like, the way that he had to get into this mindset of, like, being an abuser and acting as an abuser, which was apparently very hard for him, which I can imagine.
Yeah, if you're not already doing that,
right.
I can imagine it's something you want to sit there and imagine yourself doing.
And he put on a lot of hats in that scenario, so he has to, like, do that. He has to do it right. He has to do it authentically. And also he has to direct the scene. So it is understandable to me that he took a step back, that he brought in a woman's gaze. And I think that that was the right move, since he was already directing the movie.
Yeah, because for that interview too, he said, like, Blake basically directed those scenes herself. And had, like, the intimacy coordinator there with her, and they were doing those as them, and, like, she was really driving those scenes, which made sense because you would want a woman to do that. One of the things that also brought up for me too was maybe this film would have benefited from a female director.
Probably.
Yeah, like, at the end of the day, should a man be directing a movie about domestic violence from this lens? Maybe not. Yeah. That probably didn't help the situation either, because he does have to wear all those hats. That has to be super high stress. And you're the director, and you have a vision in your head, and you have a story you want to tell, but it's not really your story to tell.
Exactly.
So then you have to pull in all these other people to help. You're going to have creative differences because you're the director, and you should be the end say at the end of this, but you won't be.
Yeah.
And I think that might be really hard to reconcile for a lot of people. I know I couldn't do it.
Totally. And that's part of this, where I, like, in the things that have been said and have been brought out about it, I think he went about it in the right way with the circumstances that were had. Like, he really did seem to try and bring all of those people in. But at the end of the day, the optics of it just aren't great. Like, the reality is you probably should have had a female director who would have been able to, like, probably do it in an easier way, and just a lot less stress.
A lower stress set where you weren't trying to have one person wear 6 hats.
Yeah, exactly.
And could just direct.
Exactly. And then the other thing that made this a lot more challenging is on the other side of it, the marketing on Lively and Reynolds and Sklenor's side was vastly different.
Yes. Yeah. But, okay, so here, again, I don't love this book. And one of the biggest things you're going to hear me say about this book is the fact that there's no trigger warnings on this freaking book that is just riddled with content that should have one. And I feel like this movie was marketed the same way Colleen wanted the book to be marketed. And
it is a little bit deceptive and manipulative.
Yeah.
As this fluffy floral romance, get your flowers on, go to the movies, have this romantic comedy. That's the way it was marketed. You have Sklenar and Reynolds doing this interview of Reynolds interviewing Sklenar about how he's the love interest in the movie and it's happy-go-lucky and it's funny, and you're marketing it that way. If that had been... Well, actually, I think that was the first interview that I saw marketed for this movie. I don't think I saw any of the other ones. I had read the book, and I thought to myself, oh, wow, they must have changed a lot in this movie, because it must be, like, more of a romantic comedy than it was.
Atlas had a bigger role, magically, that he was even on the press tour, because let's be real. He's in, like, what, 5 minutes of this movie?
Yes. So then comes the speculation of, like, oh, if you're marketing it that way, that's what I'm expecting to go see, and that's not what I get. And I've seen some Reddit threads about, like, people's personal experience with that. Like, this comes back to the trigger warnings conversation that we had in part 2 that will be coming out next week, that we'll talk about those trigger warnings and how there's a lack thereof and the dangers associated with that. But also there's a lot of speculation, and I don't know really whether this is my opinion or not, but there's a lot of speculation of, like, was this just to get people going to the movie and paying to see the movie because Blake Lively had, you know, wanted it to do well and wanted it to make money?
Yeah.
And I don't love the deception of it, but it is, you know...
It's on par with the book.
Yeah, exactly. It's very on par with the book, and it's on par with Hollywood. This is what Hollywood does. Like, there's been so many things about Blake Lively now coming out from her interviews in 2016 and her time on Gossip Girl about how she's, like, very just a little bit out of touch. Like, you know, she's attacking interviews and she's making sarcastic comments and she's making a joke about some of the contents of the actual book. But this is not new for Hollywood.
No, not even. This isn't even, like, the most controversial cast fighting in Hollywood.
No. Well, and I think, like, something to take away from this too is that even a couple as beloved as Ryan and Blake are not perfect.
No, and no one should expect them to be. Like, even no one's perfect.
We should not be putting Hollywood actors on a pedestal in the way that we have been, especially with this couple who are seemingly perfect. They have the perfect life. Blake is in interviews being like, and my hair care brand, and Ryan had his movie do really well, and I had my movie do really well. And is that an out of touch comment for what the content of this movie is? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's not a good look for her at all, but she's also not perfect. She is a nepo baby in Hollywood. Like,
yeah, who has admittedly said she hates doing interviews and sucks at them,
which she does. Like, she's just not perfect, and we can't, you know, like, people are scrutinizing her for it, where it's like, she's just not perfect because she's a human being in Hollywood who grew up in Hollywood, and that's the way that it is. And she has been, you know, like, ask comments in interviews and things like that, ask pointed questions, where it's probably really annoying too, because she's a woman and she gets, like, shit on for that all of the time.
Absolutely. I think every single interview I watched that had Blake in it asked her about the wardrobe and
music. Yeah.
As, like, two of the first questions.
And I think that's, like, largely because people didn't like the wardrobe, which we heavily disagree with. We loved it.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, she also took a lot of the questions that were specific to the domestic violence and made them into jokes. So, like, they asked her about the other things that they could ask her about. So there's all this, like, you can go in so deep about all of these things of he said, she said. And there was the situation where Baldoni had asked one of the trainers on set how much Blake weighed, because he needed to lift her up and he had a back injury and he wanted to make sure he was safe to do so. And that's also getting, like, further in depth into this, like, we're just picking at every little thing we can in order to put them down, because it's a them versus him. And my thing is, what we wanted to do out of this is start a conversation about domestic violence that got completely butchered because we have two different separate marketing strategies and this very clear drama that is, like, happening among the scenes, and that's taking away from the conversation of the actual movie. And we want more of these books to get turned into movies. We want these to be successful and we want them to be seen in a good light. So why is everybody just going in on all of these little things that we already know Hollywood has a problem with, just to scrutinize and to put these people down who are trying to start a good conversation?
Yeah, and then almost none of them are talking about said conversation either. Like,
Baldoni is the only one who's actually talking about that conversation.
Brandon, is that his name? The actor.
Glenner, yeah.
Yeah, the actor for Atlas. Watching him in the interviews is actually really entertaining because he's just a blank fucking wall.
Dude, she'll talk and he'll just be like,
Yeah, nothing.
the whole time.
There's no thoughts behind those eyes.
Either there's no thoughts or he's just sick of it, which is very possible because they're really out in the spotlight and they've done a lot of interviews.
Yeah. And they're probably all exhausted and tired, and I felt bad for him because he's either sitting, like, he just sits there and looks like
I know.
he could be anywhere else and happy.
Yeah. And, like, even looking at Blake, you never know what she's going to say in an interview. Like, I'm watching her and I'm like, what's she going to say now? Like, I would be a little bit scared to be up there too. And he's just like, I'm just going to sit here and get through it. And he's pretty funny to watch.
Yeah, it was very entertaining. I kind of got sidetracked a lot because I was like, ugh, and his mustache.
His mustache.
Talk about that in an episode. Did you know that there wasn't any chemistry reads for Blake and Justin either? I found that a really interesting piece.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. Because in case you don't know what a chemistry read is, in Hollywood, when you're casting for love interests in movies, you typically have a chemistry read to make sure the actors can actually pull off that they love each other. Because we've all seen those movies where you see the love interest and they look like they hate each other and they just, like, cannot act past their personal...
Samuel L. Jackson in literally anything.
Yeah, they just can't do it. So there was one for Atlas and Lily, but there wasn't one for Ryle and Lily. And I found that... Because they still managed to pull it off really well, in my opinion. Fully believed it. But I just found it was so interesting that they either wanted Blake so bad, they're like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Or if they're like, we'll just make it work.
Mm-hmm.
It was just an interesting choice there. And then it adds more to that, like, context behind it of, like, do we just need these names behind this movie to make sure it does well purely on notoriety?
Right. Interesting. Yeah. And I mean, we even talked about the fact that, like, it's not surprising that Colleen Hoover and Blake Lively kind of had similar opinions, at least seemingly had similar opinions on this, because Colleen Hoover didn't put any trigger warnings on her book, and Blake Lively is marketing it in the same way. Like, these things add up and they make sense.
And Colleen was with Blake all the time for these interviews.
But what I did really appreciate is Baldoni's perspective on the way that he really wanted to get this movie right and start an important conversation. There were also some, like, speculations about how Blake Lively didn't actually post any domestic violence content or resources until well after it was posted, and Baldoni had that right from the get-go. So there was a very clear miscommunication on the priorities of how to market this movie.
Yeah, even for our podcast episode, we're like, okay, our top 3 regions for viewers are Australia, Canada, and US, and we have all the links for that, and they will be in the descriptions for this podcast and the next episode to make sure people have resources. And we're lowly content creators.
Exactly.
And that was top of mind.
100%. So I think that, you know, like, she just doesn't know how to do it in the way that was good for optics, and that's why she's getting so much backlash. And I personally think, like, again, personal opinion, I think that it should have been more of a priority in her eyes if she was going to make this book adaptation into a movie, that the conversation was more top of mind and not just, like, joking about all of it, because the perception that it gives is that you're just looking for a successful movie and you know, your life is going perfectly and you're making money off of it and you don't care about the actual conversation that's being had. That's the perception of it, and I'm not going to put my opinions on her about, like, whether I think that that's actually what she believes, but that is just the result of how she marketed it.
Yeah, that is just the way it looks from the outside looking in, and we'll never probably know what it looks like from the inside looking out.
Well, never. And, like, even, like, if Blake were to be the one directing this, I don't know that she would have done a better job than Baldoni. Like, we talk about how there should have been a female director. Absolutely, there should have been, but I don't know that it would have been a better movie had she been, because I think Baldoni's priorities were in the right place, at least how he did it.
Yes, don't get me wrong, I don't think Blake should have been the director for this either.
Yeah.
I think actors and directors, when you overstep those bounds...
There was too many hats.
It's too much work. There's very few movies I've seen where one of the leads has directed and it has turned out well.
And for this, it was too dangerous. When Colleen called Justin to play Ryle, like, one of those hats should have been taken off. Again, I personally believe he did a good job at both. I just think that it wasn't the right way to go about it, and it caused a lot of these problems, and then the marketing strategy caused a lot of problems too. I think that's our take on what happened.
Yeah, if you want to deep dive into it, there's just so many things on the internet to take you down rabbit holes that are toxic.
Take care of your
So
mental health
toxic.
with this one,
Yeah.
y'all. Like, we spent a couple hours watching YouTube videos and things like that with this, and my mental health was already
It was
like,
bad.
holy crap, I'm getting opinions on things that I have no, say in. I have no like
It also destroyed my algorithm.
oh man.
Like the amount of time last night after I did all the research for this episode that I just spent looking at the dumbest shit on Instagram just
Yeah.
to make it stop showing me It Ends With Us content because I could not take anymore. And I don't, if Instagram has the ability to block hashtags and keywords like TikTok does, I'm going to find a way and do it because holy shit, I need it to go away.
Right. And so take care of your mental health. The reason that we're speaking out on it is because we do want more books to become movies. We want to support it. And we also care about the message that this movie has brought out. And I think it did a better job than the book did. And I care about that. And I want people to have the resources they need. And I think that this is an important conversation. I think people are getting too deep into it. I think we are focusing on the wrong things. And I think we wanted to use our platform to talk about the right things and to talk about the things that matter to us.
Yes. Which kind of segues into the second half of this that we mentioned, which was we want more books to be made into movies. And does this and the absolute media storm and the potential for career ruining optics impact that? Like, I'm going to use another really big series that is currently slated to become something, and that's ACOTAR.
Mm-hmm.
What actor wants to put their career at the whims of this community? Looking at what they're doing right now to Blake and Justin. What author wants to put their books at the mercy of studios who might do something really similar to this and destroy the name of their book? ACOTAR has domestic abuse in it to the point where I know people who've DNF'd this book.
Yep.
When I read this book series the first time it came out, I got to the second book and DNF'd it because I couldn't handle that content at that time.
Right.
I wasn't in a place where I wanted to read about domestic abuse. And ACOTAR's riddled with it.
Yes.
And, like, how do you market that then? How do you have that conversation in a fantasy setting, which has usually been safe, but now I'm like, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention, like, the actors and how upset people are going to be no matter what by who gets cast in this. Like, is it even worth an author's time or the potential gains if you're someone like SJM who's already rolling in the millions? Does the money from a movie make sense for you? Do you be like, you know what? I'm not selling the rights for this. I don't want to risk it. I want my work to say pure,
unscathed, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
As it is, instead of risking the book community coming for you because you made a mistake
and just spiraling in speculation and accusatory behavior. It's really toxic, and I really hope that doesn't happen. And I think what we want to do is also use this to do more of this kind of thing where we talk about books that have been adapted into movies and what the nuances are and the complications that come with it. And like, I kind of want to get a little bit more into the why they choose to make certain decisions from the book to the movie and all of those things, because we want to see it more.
Yeah, because we have an upcoming episode for After where we're reading the fanfic, the book, and the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I can already tell you because I've seen the movie and I finished the fanfic a couple days ago. Like, the differences already, I have so many questions and I can't wait till we can talk about it more, because there are things they changed that make sense. Like, you can't portray a lot of it from book to movie and make it make sense, because I know one of the things I saw Blake and Colleen mentioning in interviews was that Lily's super dry verbally. Like, her actual lines, I guess you would say, in the book when she's talking, really meh.
Yeah.
But her internal dialogue is a lot more interesting, and she has a lot more, like, quirks and jokes and all of that in her head.
Totally.
So when you're doing it as a movie, you need to shift that because you can't see what she's thinking.
Yeah.
You can't portray that on the film as well.
Yeah.
Anyway. So you have to take that inside voice and make it the outside voice, which some people don't like when you take away lines they really, really liked, but didn't actually show you the character.
Yeah, but this movie in particular had that intended effect on me. I felt from Lily's point of view. I understood all of the different things that she was going through, and I can't even say that I got that from the book because I didn't.
No.
Like, the book wasn't written in a way that actually made me feel those things, and the movie was. So that does speak volumes. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing more of this kind of thing, but do you have anything else to say on, like, this It Ends With Us situation that's been going on?
No, I think that's my piece now.
We are going to put as many resources as we can in our description for domestic violence resources, that if you or someone you know is struggling with domestic violence or even mental health and things like that, that they need a resource, it will be in our description. And yeah, pick up a book, love yourself, do things that are good for your mental health.
If you want to catch next week's episode, that'll actually talk about the beginning of our journey with this, of reading the book and watching the movie and talking about the differences and what we liked about either or both of those, and the things they chose to keep and the things they chose to get rid of. You can find that next week. So subscribe if you want to get notified for that, or just come hunt us down again.
Thanks so much. We'll see y'all later.
Bye.